I call the meeting to order.
The meeting has been posted according to open meeting laws.
Roll call.
President Johnson.
Here.
Trustee Alexander.
Here.
Trustee Holm.
He's excused.
That's right. Trustee Nugent. Here. Trustee Renucci.
Here.
Trustee Smalley.
Here.
And Trustee Wisniewski.
Here.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll start with citizen participation per Village Resolution 2017-01. Anyone wishing to address the village board during citizen participation will be allowed 5 minutes. Your subject must specifically relate to matters under the jurisdiction of the village board, whether on the agenda or not. The village board should not engage in a discussion regarding comments because it was not part of the publicly noticed agenda. Upon conclusion of the citizen participation segment, members of the audience are not allowed further comment unless they're participating in a public hearing or specifically allowed by a majority vote of the village board due to involvement in an agenda item. Going once, going twice. Okay, I will close citizen participation. Move on to consent agenda. One motion and a second will approve all the following items. Any item may be pulled from the list and voted on separately.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
Any questions or discussion?
I had a question as far as the update of the collection policy.
That's under miscellaneous business.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm John Cameron with Ellers, and I'll be walking through the presentation with you this evening. This is the first workshop session for the financial management plan update for this year, and really kind of focused on outlining the capital improvement plan and just more food for thought in terms of giving you some information to think about as you go out throughout the summer, and then come back and start budget workshop planning in the fall here. So if you go to the second page of the presentation that says 2025 through 2029 capital improvement plan by department. In summary, on the pie chart, you've got a little over $9.5 million of identified capital improvement projects between 2025 and 2029. And the majority of those are for street reconstruction improvement projects. Equates to approximately 44% of the total capital improvement plan. And then the associated water and sewer main improvement work that goes along with road reconstruction projects. That makes up the bulk of the capital improvement plan, but you can see a breakdown by other functions in terms of parks, fire, public works equipment, administration, airport, rescue expenses. The next page shows the total projects in a little bit greater detail. The full detail is in the additional handout packet, and then there is additional detail on this page in the memo that is also in the packet. But for the category type has a breakdown of anticipated funding sources between the tax levy, fund balance slash reserves, general obligation debt, and then through the property tax levy, as well as for some categories, grants and aids. And then for the utilities, some available cash or planned use of cash within the context of available surpluses within any one particular year. So you can see the different sources of funding by the type of project in summary out through 2029. For a more condensed version of that, if you look at the next page, the sources of funding walking from left to right for 2025 out through 2029, general obligation debt in total is anticipated to be approximately $4.4 million. And you can see that broken down in terms of about 1.4 million, just under 1.4 million anticipated debt issuance in 2025, about 1.1 million in 2026, a little over 500,000 in 27, 725,000 in 28, and 600,000 approximately in 29. Grants and aids, really 25 and 26 in terms of projects that are grant or other aid eligible. The use of different fund balance, your fund balance and other reserves. This is really using your capital projects fund and really what you're planning to potentially levy for annually. See using fund balance in 25 and 26 at 540,000 and 635,000, and then it starts to go down thereon after 205,000 in 2027, 120,000 in 28, and 170,000 in 2029. The tax levy is shown to be funding 222,000 in 2025, approximately 181,000 in 26, and then what's identified in the plan is 222,000 in 27, 228,000 approximately in 28, and 123,000 in 2029. But more on that in just a second. You also have your equipment replacement fund and then cash within the utilities for approximately 190,000 over the next 5-year period and 490,000 respectively. One thing to kind of talk about and really hone in on is the projected levy capacity in terms of what you plan to levy within the context of the tax levy for capital projects versus what might be ultimately available in terms of the maximum amount that you can levy under levy limits. And looking at where the projected excess versus shortfall is. So really, we're showing levying to the max for your capital projects fund and where possible, and what is projected to be shown in terms of that projected levy excess versus shortfall is starting in 2027, the amount that you would otherwise like to levy to go into the capital project fund is exceeded by levy limits in terms of where we're projecting you can levy under levy limit. And that really is, again, municipalities are limited to increasing their property tax levy year in and year out by the increase in net new construction. So what this is potentially showing is that your increase in net new construction is potentially going to be outpaced by your capital project funding needs, so that by 2029, you may not be able to actually levy that 123,000 that's identified for property tax levy funding to go into the capital projects fund. In 2028, you may not, again, be able to levy that full 228,000. You have, at this point, a potential shortfall of about 171,000. And in 2027, you may not be able to levy that full 222,000 that's identified for the tax levy. You'd have a potential shortfall of just under 70,000. So at this point, it's really more just pointing out that that's a possibility and something to continue to monitor in terms of where you'd be able to potentially levy under levy limits. Some of the other highlights of the plan in terms of the financial aspects of the capital improvement plan, when we look at the total amount that's identified for general obligation debt and what that would do to the tax rate for debt, the max tax rate for debt tops out at just over $1 per thousand of assessed value, $1.01 per thousand of assessed value. The total cost of debt due to the capital improvement plan to the taxpayer is anticipated to be just over $200 or $2,800 through 2045. the maximum percentage of your total general obligation borrowing limit relative to the max is 38%. So all municipalities across the state of Wisconsin are capped at the amount of general obligation debt that you can issue, and that limit is no more than 5% of your total equalized value. So you'd be at a 38% of that limit, which is very healthy. What is identified to be water sewer related, what's shown in the plan thus far is that the utilities can cover their projected debt service costs, which is a positive under the existing rate structures. And then, as I mentioned, really, I think the item to monitor here is the total amount of debt levy versus what you can levy under levy limits. And really the diminishing capital project fund reserves down $500,000 approximately between 2023 and 2024, and that's shown on the next page. So this is just a total breakdown of your capital projects fund in total in terms of all of the different sub-accounts. So the very bottom in terms of future capital projects under your assigned fund balance, that balance has dropped approximately $500,000 between 23 and 24. Some other items just of note is that you potentially may have to shuffle some subcategories around for public works equipment purchases as well as police department needs. So in total, the balance stays at, runs out to approximately, or down to approximately $2.2 million by 2029. At the end of 2024, it's forecasted to be at $2.8 million. So the balance does see some further diminishment over the next several years, but still obviously remains in a very positive balance. But there are some subcategories that you may have to move fund balance around for to be able to accommodate within the context of the capital improvement plan. Some other considerations, if you look at the next page, and this just shows your allowable levy as opposed to the projected operating levy and then the capital projects levy over time. What we're solving for here in terms of just showing this graphically is the maximum amount that the operating levy and capital projects levy can increase, assuming you use no abated debt for levy limit capacity sake. So the source of funding, the stress, I guess, test is that you see your capital levy, which is shown graphically in green, the amount that is able to, you're able to levy year over year relative to your projected allowable levy under levy limits diminish over time. And that's really just because the projected levy capacity is greater than the projected amount of net new construction, which in this case, we've got conservatively estimated at less than 1% a year. So,
Excuse me, you're projecting, though, just so I'm clear about this, you're projecting new construction at the rates we have now for like 28 and 29?
it's, I would say, maybe a little bit more conservative than the rates you've experienced historically. So and this is net new construction, so not just total new construction, net new. So it takes into consideration demolitions, those types of items over time. But we're projecting that at a little under 1% a year. So what this is showing is if that comes to fruition, the amount that you can levy for capital projects goes from about $332,000 in 2025 down to zero by 2029. In addition to that, if you look at things on the operating side, your operating levy exceeds your levy limit by 2029 as well. So, not necessarily sounding the alarm bells, just pointing out that over future, it's something to continue to monitor. If this kind of holds true, if you think about when you potentially might have to look at the possibility of a referendum, or conversely, cutting costs to stay under your maximum levy amount. 2029 is kind of your bogey year. Next page, if you look at just your capital improvement plan, total considerations in terms of the estimated tax rate and what that means for a property valued at $250,000. The total tax rate at this point is forecasted to top out at $6.65 per thousand. For a property valued at $250,000, that would be going from about $1,500 in 2024 to $1,660 in 2026. So as you think about that, I think the overall message is, to the extent you have the appetite to do so, levy to the max in terms of what you plan to put into the capital projects fund, because from a levy limit capacity standpoint, your ability to continue to do so is likely going to be diminished over the next 5-year period of time. Last page, just kind of summarizing things, and more food for thought as you move into the summer months here. I think, where we would take some direction from the financial management plan update and subsequent workshop sessions is just kind of seeking some direction on, really, do we want to prioritize our levy limit capacity, or do we want to more prioritize around a tax rate and overall tax rate impact? And then, looking at where we do, want to utilize the capital levy, kind of setting a minimum target that helps us, plan out over the next 5 years, and shows where we might have some gaps where the levy, if the levy does go away from a capital improvement, capital project standpoint, where we might have to rely upon increased issuance of general obligation debt, or you may have to shuffle capital improvement projects around over the next 5-year planning period. So with that being said, happy to answer questions. If not, again, this is really more from an informational standpoint and meant to give you just kind of an overview of the next 5 years, and subsequent workshop sessions will dive into the details further.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Before I monopolize with a bunch of questions, I'll let you all go first, if you have any questions.
Your question is probably the most educated. You probably-
I would not say that, but I'll take it. I'll take it. Okay. If we could go back to the chart after the pie chart, the SIP by department and source. Yep. So I see a pretty drastic fall off in the numbers for 27, 28, and 29. And I heard everything you were just talking about in the levy and things like that. How much of that in the plan is driven by the levy versus, well, that's a ways out, and sometimes we don't
Sure.
always know what the projects are. Talk to me a little bit about that.
I might lean on Eileen a little bit on,
And these are all fair game questions for staff, too.
or staff, yes, Jason or others, to answer the source of the capital projects.
I'm going to ask Jason to answer that one, because a lot of that looks like that's in streets where the drop-off is. Just looks like it's generally some DPW things.
Let me take a look at what I provided.
And why, while Jason's looking at that, the reason for my question is just, again, trying to keep with the conservative forecasts that you've tried to put together. If we've not included some things in 27, 28, 29, then it's a much worse picture.
Right, yeah.
Would conversely then, on 2026, maybe we overdid it a little bit?
2026 is a big year.
And I guess while Jason's looking that up, what were the targeted years for GO issuance?
There's general obligation debt that's identified annually, but the bigger years are 25 and 26. So if you go to the next page on the presentation, you can see the debt issuances or the summary of GO debt, that's planned for each year. It's certainly possible that 27 and 28 could be grouped up into, one borrowing, where you're not, needing to do a debt issuance each year. You might be able to group, a couple of years' worth of projects into a single borrowing in terms of getting, the most bang for the buck from an issuance, cost of issuance expense. In fact, at most, you can group 3 years' worth of capital projects into a single borrowing before you run afoul from an arbitrage and spend down, perspective.
What are you forecasting as a interest rate? I mean, that's sometimes reading tea leaves, but
Well, it sure is these days. In the packet, we've got the build-out of the different notes, which range from 4% up to 5.5%. So it looks at, I'd say, current interest rates plus an additional 50 basis points or 0.5% for market movement over where they are right now. 20-year money is depending on the credit rating, right around 4% plus or minus right now.
So in 28, we're showing Edward Street with Grove Alley, and right now that's a $400,000 line item. As we get closer to that, that number is going to be adjusted more for current pricing, so I suspect it will go up rather than down. And then in 29, we have, so what I've been trying to do is do a construction project and then a maintenance project, and, just to try and maintain what we do have. And then in 29, we're showing that as a maintenance year, which is typically, a couple $100,000 project. So that, I think it's just the timing, the way that's working out there.
okay. And then, and I know this is on the utility side, but what's our timeline on like all the PFAS stuff? And does that need to be baked into here?
And so it's not yet, right? So there's not a new well in this 5-year yet, just because we don't know when that comes along, or any dollar figures on that yet.
Jason, wouldn't you think, though, that that well would have to be within the next couple of years?
I definitely think we're going to be talking about it. I'm actually hoping we're starting the conversation in 2025. There is a line item in there for a well siting study, again, depending on how this, how our settlement goes. So that's kind of what I'm leaning on at this point until there's going to come a point when we can't wait any longer and we're just going to have to go. But I'm kind of hoping to see how the settlement shakes out to be able to do it using those funds rather than having to borrow or, another project suffering.
We have 3 wells now active, correct?
Correct.
And so if one of them goes down, that leaves us with just, with 7, 3? What are
5, 6, and 7 are active.
Got it.
And then just to clarify, in terms of the borrowings, the potential borrowings in the plan, what's constructed is borrowing in 2025 for your 25 and 26 projects, doing a borrowing in 27 for your 27 and 28 capital projects, and then one final one in 29.
Okay. Staying on this slide, so we as a board for many years have operated under kind of a policy of, we don't want that max percent of statutory limit to go above 50%. I guess this is more of a statement than maybe a question, and I'd appreciate your comment. I feel like that our number is getting better because of the pace of equalized value increases. What are some other metrics we should be looking at as we're embarking on these other general obligation debt issuances? Because I want to make sure, you talked about on the operating side, I don't want us to be consumed with, now in a situation of a higher cost of capital than it was 3-4 years ago.
Sure. I think focusing on the actual amount that you're levying and what the levy for debt, what that is changing annually is a good metric to be able to look at, because you're right, they're not only, the village, but many municipalities over the last couple of years have experienced pretty dramatic amounts of equalized value growth, which, when you have a tax levy that has to remain fairly static under levy limits, it drives your tax rate down. It also is expanding your general obligation debt capacity. That 5% of your total equalized value is growing. So another metric that we can look at in subsequent workshops is just your overall level of indebtedness compared to peers within the same rating category. So that would be something that, Moody's, Standard & Poor's would also look at as well. So those would be some additional items that would be worth considering in subsequent workshop sessions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I see like on, I guess, a couple of slides later, and your total, the roughly on a $250,000 home, the portion related to capital projects. But yeah, I'd like to see kind of what that looks like in the general obligation. And I'd like to go back to pre-pandemic, just because so much has changed since, we compare 24 to 23. Well, that's kind of the same.
Sure.
I just want to see that a little bit longer term.
Sure. That's all doable.
I think my last question for now is, when you talked about abated debt, we did look at that last year, I remember, and we ultimately, we did a bunch of work and then chose not to do it. Is this something that we feel like that we want to revisit again this year? I'm kind of speaking for Eileen and staff here a little bit. I just felt like we did a lot of work, and then there was kind of like a big hurry up, and then it was like, oh, no, we're not going to do it. So is it worth our effort here this year to plan on putting time into that or not?
Time into ensuring that the utilities and other entities can pay their abatement sources?
No, there was some thought that we might use the abated debt.
Oh, I see.
Levy
I see, yeah.
But we did not.
Yeah. So, under levy limits, when you talk about your total amount that you can levy, you start with last year's levy amount, you back out last year's debt service payments, you add in your net new construction, and that essentially, there's some, other adjustments, but by and large, that gets you the total amount that you can, levy on a base, your base levy to the coming year, and then you get to claim next year's total principal and interest payments for general obligation debt. That is, you can, claim up to the maximum amount under levy limits of your total general obligation principal and interest payments. Ideally, what you want to just claim is the actual amount that you need to levy. So the difference between your total principal and interest payments and the amount that is actually hitting the property tax levy. What some municipalities do in order to, have some levy amount that goes for, say, capital projects, is to use that unabated levy capacity, levy that dollars, and then use them for capital projects. And that eliminates, or drives down the ability or the need to borrow, because you're levying those dollars instead. The the pitfall there is, as your general obligation debt goes down or, fully matures, you lose the ability to levy that abated amount. So what we strongly advise municipalities is to never use that, capacity, that abatement capacity, for ongoing operational needs, because you just create a hole for yourself in the future when that debt does mature. But to use it for one-time capital projects, that might be a possibility. To think of it as a perpetual source for to fund your capital projects, again, depends on, the amount of debt that you're going to have abated over time. So it is a potential strategy. It's something to consider looking at I would say more the out years of your CIP. In the short term, I would think, you'd want to levy to the max and use that to, that difference to put into your capital projects fund.
Other questions? Do you want to go over, you provided another file for us. Do we want to go through, is that a separate agenda item?
I don't know if we necessarily, if you'd like me to review it, I'm more than happy to, but it was really just to give you guys different ways to review. I know that when you get that chart, it's a lot of data, so I was trying to come up with different ways, and I'm completely receptive to any feedback, what would be helpful to review it, but just used Matt's method of doing pivot tables and came up with charts for you by department, so you could look at it broken down by department, much like you do in our budget document. And then, as we had talked about the debt issuance, so I also gave a chart that showed you everything that right now is in the plan as being funded by tax levy, everything in the plan for grants and aids. The one thing I'd point out on that is we do have Lake Bluff walking trails in there as grants and aids. We have not, the other projects we have been awarded grants for, we have not been awarded a grant for that. That was simply direction by the board. We would pursue that if we get a grant. So it's in there kind of as a placeholder, but we haven't been awarded any funds on that project. And of course, I have the fund balance and reserves, and then as we talked about the debt, I had broken it down by your 2025 GO notes, 2027 and 2029. Were there any questions on that, or any feedback on what would be helpful as you guys review all these projects? I know it's a lot.
Yeah, I was just looking at last year's CIP, and it would be nice to have like a year over year, because if you look at total cost of debt due to CIP to taxpayer, last year was $1,080 through 2040, and then this year it's $2,803 through 2045. And then the max percent of statutory limit, last year 44%, this year it's at 38. So it'd be kind of nice to see that change over like a 3 or 4, 5 year period. Like, why did it go from 44% to 38? So,
That's probably equalized value.
yeah.
Any questions or comments on the project list as presented? Again, this is just draft, very early. I would ask that, for lists that are specific to the boards and committees that you all serve on to run these by, let's make sure we got the right priorities on these two, especially if we're issuing debt, and that we can get it done, and if we're missing something too. Okay. Anything else on capital?
Did you want to talk about your questions related to the Town Line Road project?
Yeah. I guess what I'm looking for Town Line Road, so in my memo, I talked about Town Line Road being moved up in the 5-year. And there's an opinion of cost from Tim and an exhibit showing potential improvements. And I guess I'd like to get a feel from the board what your thoughts are on that corridor. So currently in our 5-year, we have Town Line Road improvements at $500,000. And that's essentially going in there and milling out the asphalt and putting asphalt back. The improvements that Tim and I looked at and potentially are proposing is that project's like $1 million project, right? So we're talking about twice the money, obviously. So I guess what I'd like to hear from the board is what your thoughts are. That was adding some curb and gutter and addressing some drainage issues, things like that. So I don't know if the board has any thoughts.
I had a question in regard, is this going to be done in conjunction with the town of Troy?
So if you remember, we have an intergovernmental agreement with the town of Troy on this. So yes, there's a dollar amount within that agreement And I think they're capped at, I believe it's $80,000 to contribute to the project altogether.
And I know you mentioned curb and gutter. Is there sidewalks figured into that project?
So if
I
you look-
didn't see any on
If
the
you look
list.
at that exhibit, it shows the existing sidewalks, but it does not show anything new. So the only real area potentially we could do a sidewalk would be on the east side of Town Line Road, and those driveways are shorter driveways, so there really isn't a lot of room for sidewalks. The other thing Tim and I looked at is potentially the west side of Town Line Road could be another corridor for a multi-use trail someday, potentially from ES out towards the park.
That's what I was thinking about, was
So-
Booth Lake Memorial
But,
Park.
but obviously that is not part of what's in front of you today.
So the widening the roadway, 11 foot, currently 10 foot, why and what is the financial impact on that?
So I don't know what exactly the dollar amount is. Tim and I had a conversation about that as we were standing on the side of the road at Town Line. I said, should we widen this thing? And Tim said, well, if you widen it, I think what's going to happen is the traffic's going to go faster through there. So, but one reason to potentially widen it would be for a bike lane, you know, for bike pedestrian accommodations. Yeah, so it is narrow there. I'll say that. And I hadn't thought about it like that. But Tim has a valid point that I think if you do widen it, it all of a sudden becomes, a raceway, or traffic is going to move faster through there. So
Yeah, I agree with that. And have we had anybody complain and say, hey, this is too narrow? We need to make it wider, we need a bike path there, or can we investigate somewhere else that we can put a bike path out to Booth Lake?
yeah. So to my knowledge, we have not. I don't know, Jeremy, if you've seen anything or anything over the years with Town Line Road that you can think of.
I would say most of the kids are using, they're going through, they come down Graydon and then they go through that subdivision out Emery Street and then they're turning left on 20 and then going down to Town Line. They really don't use Town Line so much and go up and down that hill. That's another reason kids don't like to ride down that hill and then have to ride up it. It's a lot easier to stay on level, so they mostly go through the subdivision. So I don't know if we necessarily have to
Yeah, I've never
widen it for
seen
bikes.
anybody go, I've never seen anybody on a bike on that road, to be completely honest with you. I think that would be, somebody's taking their life in their own hands on that road if they're doing that. And is 1 foot really accommodating for a bike trail?
Right.
Yeah,
Understood.
I don't. Yeah.
Well, it would be 1 foot per lane. So, but I understand the point. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then in the mornings, people still speed through there in the mornings, so they had somebody right on my tail the other morning.
So essentially then, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but then if you add the 1 foot on each side, but you have a bike lane, then essentially the road lanes are still going to be the same, it's just you're going to have a 2 foot bike lane.
Correct.
So I think what I'd like to see is a menu of options. Instead of just talking about, conjectures, give us 3 or 4 options, like, the Bare Bones project and the Cadillac, and then the 2, 1 or 2 in between. And let's look at it and talk about what, we're interested in. Because somebody didn't like my comment. Somebody really wanted a bike lane. Because, where I see the most wear and tear on that road is on the west side. And so if we're going to, put money into this, I want to make sure that what we're doing is to preserve it. So I don't want to put curb and gutter, on the east side, our side, and on the west side, we're not we're going to have to come to some agreement with the town here as to what this looks like. But the road today, especially with our freeze-thaw cycles that we've got going on, there's just giant potholes down through there. So I think let's focus on what are our options. And I like the idea of maybe then through Booth Lake, the park, that we can explore a multi-use trail that would, go all the way down from the school all the way to the lake. Yes, okay with that? Yeah. Look at options? Okay. So whenever you and Tim are ready, bring it back. Let's talk about it. But yeah, I think you're right to be thinking about this right now. Okay.
I do like the idea of putting in a 5-inch asphalt layer for that town line, because you do get a lot of traffic, heavy traffic down there.
Anybody else see anything else in my memo? Any questions on anything else?
I do want to, I'm trying to look here. We do have a tornado warning. Let's take a minute to make sure we're going to be safe here. Yeah. Yeah, I think one of these, it's for Walworth, but maybe not for us. You say that, and then, our phones will go berserk.
Yeah, no kidding.
So there's a thunderstorm warning, flood watch, and a severe tornado warning till 7:30. It's located over Fort Atkinson.
Yeah, it looks like it's west of here.
Yeah, we're right on the edge. Okay, yeah. So maybe somebody just keep an eye on this as we go through this meeting here.
Jason, what do you think as far as potential intersection improvements?
For Town Line?
Yeah, you have it listed here on the north end of
Yeah,
it.
so Tim had mentioned that, potentially some sightline concerns. So, but I'm really not sure how that could change much without changing any profile of Highway 20. So that's really something Tim put in there. I mean, we had briefly talked about it when we visited the site, but again, I don't really know that there's much we could do with that intersection. So,
What about with ES?
yeah, it's something we can certainly look at with the county, when that time comes. I don't know. I think there's really not any visibility issues there. It's more of I think it's the speeds and
Patience.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, honestly, the only thing that I think that could change that intersection is a roundabout. I don't know what else, could happen there.
Jason, you did, speaking of sidewalks, there's a report somewhere I saw in there that they're going to continue sidewalks down Main Street to town line, correct? Am I wrong here? I thought I saw it somewhere in our paperwork.
I think it's in our CIP.
Okay, well, my question is, though, because originally, remember, we were going to go all the way to town line, but the school said they didn't want to see it down there because they thought it would be too dangerous.
Correct. So our plan at this point is to try to at least get the sidewalk to the shopping center. But you are correct. You are remembering correct. The school did not want it going all the way to town line.
But then, would then a crossing signals or something then be appropriate for that if we were to go that route? I don't know, I'm just asking.
And again, that's kind of where the conversation ended, because the school really didn't want it going to town line. They wanted to see somehow the sidewalk get back up, or pedestrian traffic get back up to Graydon and then cross town line at Graydon where the existing crosswalk is, so.
I think it'd be great to investigate the possibility of a roundabout.
That's obviously a question that can be posed. I don't know what it takes to put in a roundabout.
That's all
I
I would
know
say.
the question's been asked, there's been traffic studies, right? Over the years, there's been a couple traffic studies, and my understanding, the answer coming back out was always there aren't enough accidents there. And maybe you have something on that?
Most of them we have there now are people, it's human error. They're stopping, then they just pull out because they don't see, or they just don't, they say we didn't see them. So, I mean, that's human error. I know somebody asked about doing a four-way stop there, and county really wasn't interested.
Not on ES.
Yeah, county wasn't interested. So I think anything about a roundabout, you're gonna have to get county's approval. And they're gonna have to chip in, and I don't know if they're gonna be interested, so.
So I think as you and Tim are looking at menu of options, talk with the county, talk with the school board, or school district, I should say. And, what are those things? If we need to engage with them, obviously we'll work with the town of Troy, but I guess the town of East Troy has, I guess, some interest in both of those intersections as well. So, as you get more detail, this might be a Tri-Troy item for discussion, just for transparency, just to make sure everybody has a say in it and move on. Okay, anything else on capital, roads? Tammy, you have anything in the library? Okay. Okay. All right, we will move on to the next item. Update from Ellers regarding tax increment District 5 formation, no packet materials.
So in terms of the timeline for this potential tax increment district, I think initially was forecasted that we'd be before you this evening talking about the feasibility analysis and the tax increment district. The kind of the next step is doing a detailed development pro forma analysis, which I know we're underway on, but we just received information last week from the developer to allow us to do that analysis. So from a timeline standpoint, presenting the feasibility analysis will likely be next month in July. But the tax increment district would still be on track for creation by the board in September. So that's all I have on the update.
Any questions from the board? Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you. John, if you want to hang out here or you want to hit the road, whatever you want to do.
I'll venture outside, but you may see me walking.
That's fair enough.
If you see me running back in, then you know it's a
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Item 3, consider village-owned locations for fiber services and authorization to sign contracts for service. And you see the memo here from Eileen.
So to summarize, I'm just going to try to speed things up a little. I'm going to assume everybody read this. And to summarize, the direction I'm looking for from the board is regarding these Phase 1, the top priority locations that we identified. One of the purposes in identifying some of those locations was I had thought maybe we could provide fiber service for some of our new cameras we installed. Right now, we're paying for Cradle Points, so basically we're paying for cell service. I don't know that that is going to be cost effective after speaking with Jeremy because of the firewall equipment that we might need and the subscription services and stuff. It might make more sense just to keep the cell service for those. So I'm still analyzing that, but the direction I'm looking for from the board was the intent to provide public Wi-Fi in those parks, because that's part of the decision factor as far as where we get services. We would like to do Mitchell Park concession stand. As staff, we've talked about the needs for it at the stand. Also for, it'd be nice to add the same type of locking systems that we added to the gazebo for the restrooms eventually at the concession stand. So that's really the first question is, did we want to provide Wi-Fi services to those areas, specifically more the Playmore Park, amusement park, grandstand area?
I think I was the one that probably brought that up when we had this discussion. And, my thought was if we could add that at a reasonable cost, I think it would be a nice benefit. But if it's going to be too complicated, maybe we look at a Phase 2 on it.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that because they're public facilities. Let's make them as good as we can, but with an eye toward the cost control.
Yeah, certainly the Mitchell Park concession stand idea stands out. I mean, there's a lot of people there, people trying to transact business too, so that makes the most sense, I think, on the list.
Tammy, I'm going to just ask Tammy, does this impact the library at all? Do you see? Having Wi-Fi for your library?
Yeah, you guys get your internet services through the Lake Shore Library system, correct? Like there's some kind of, I think you have some kind of agreement or something. Yeah. Okay, so that helps. They are talking about putting equipment on the water tower. I mentioned Jason's been in conversation with them. There is some potential to be able to get the services from that cheaper than the actual fiber services, so I'll review that as well. They're also looking at that as an option to provide services to the airport area in the interim to their next phase. So the other piece I had on there was potential authorization, if the board's comfortable, for us to sign a contract for services or looking for signed contracts to begin installing services. I am having the attorneys review. There's the MSA. They haven't completed that review yet. They would review it this week. So if the board is comfortable authorizing, I'd say that could be contingent on the attorney's review of the service agreement.
So John, I looked through the SLAs and I felt pretty comfortable. I mean, it gives us an out. We get credits for, lack of performance outages and things like that. So but if you're wanted to have your eye on it too. Okay.
I had a couple things. So Exhibit A, under 3, it's showing that there's an Exhibit B. I couldn't find an Exhibit B. So Exhibit A, number 3. I'll go up.
Lit fiber service, customer may elect any time during the term to convert its lit fiber service to a dark fiber lease. See Exhibit B. I think they did provide us something on dark fiber, but maybe it's not in the packet. I don't know.
And my other question is, how do we measure that? How can we, if they're gonna, it says starting at 1 gigabyte, is it at each location? And then how do we know that it's 1 gigabyte, and how do we measure that?
Once your service is installed, you can do speed tests. So you would know if you're not getting that level of service.
Yeah, we'd work with Digicorp to configure our,
Yeah, we may want to put something in the agreement if they don't have 1 gigabyte, right? If there isn't 1 gigabyte, then is there a cost reduction or what?
Either they come up with the 1 gigabyte or we get a reduction.
so, yeah, so there's, I think what you're getting at is probably something that needs to be incorporated into table under item 6. So that's where we're getting, you're talking about packet loss and latency and jitter. I think we need to have an overall, acceptable, yeah, it's 989 gigabit, okay, or 989, megabit, then, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think
No, that's it, yeah.
I think we can specify throughput, yeah, right.
And I want to specify that this is two-way. I'm losing my technical term. Up and down. Symmetrical, thank you. It's a long day. But I think I'm always nervous about, Eileen and I chatted, I'm always nervous about signing long-term contracts if we don't have service contracts if we don't have an out. I feel like that we've built that here, so, but if anybody has concerns, please speak up. Okay. I need a motion to authorize to proceed, assuming there's only, minor adjustments on what we discussed and from legal.
So I'll move to approve the eVergent service agreement based on the minor modifications we discussed here.
And what about from legal?
After a legal review, and yeah, that staff can go ahead.
I'll second it.
Okay, any questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4, consider approving updated collection policy, which, Lori, looks like it's just very minor
Yeah.
formatting
It's
changes.
basically only housekeeping, no language was changed. It's just that the policy has evolved and added and subtracted as
needed over the last few years, and this just cleaned up all the language and made it cohesive.
Well, I'll move to approve the updated collection policy number FIN 8.
I'll
Second.
second it.
All right. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On to ordinances and resolutions. Item 1, 2024-09, amending sections 52-19, 52-24, 52-25, 52-26, and 52-27 of the municipal code pertaining to special assessments and charges. So we discussed this in our last meeting. We provided lots of good feedback. You will see the red line version there along with a clean copy. Any questions or further concerns on this item?
Then I'm going to move to approve ordinance 2024-09 as revised.
I'll second it.
Any questions or discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Really happy that we got that done. Thank you all. Okay, on to staff reports. Fire Chief's April report. Lots and lots of dates. Any questions or anything you want to highlight, Jason?
I guess I'll highlight that we did have our workshop, board workshop. It went over very well. We were there, 3 hours, John? And so I would encourage all of you to go and take advantage of that so you can learn a little bit more about how it works, the fire department works, and the ins and outs of it. We go over budget, things of all of that nature. So it was pretty neat to learn all that.
Okay, we'll just take them as a bunch here. Any questions for Jason? We saw the ask from Lori about possible dates to do that. You gotten back from?
Yep, I have that response back, and I'll be sending that to Joe tomorrow.
All right, and then last item 4, Community Development Authority minutes from March 25th. Since Jim is not here, any questions for me?
How'd it go?
Went well. So the board approved those facade grants that are listed here. These are minutes from then. We met last week to talk about TID 5 as well. So they'll be coming forward. So you heard a little bit from John earlier about TID 5. But yeah, I was really happy about the facade grants. Good presentations from the groups here. So very nice.
I'm just curious, how is this facade grant situation working for the villages? I mean, I'd like some opinions, and because we've been doing it, what now, 3 years?
I think that's right. Yeah.
I mean, I think overall, what I'd like to do is provide a nice summary with some pictures so you guys, I have a cost recap, but it would be nice if you could see the pictures. But I think overall, the village has gotten a lot of bang for our buck. There's been a lot of really good improvements that have happened, up and down Main Street, all the way, down by Climbing Tree, all the way down to Roadies, and obviously in between. So it seems like it's been working out really well. It's been very well received, and every cycle, I have somebody who's on my list that contacts me that is waiting for the next, just to hear if there's going to be another cycle. So there's definitely
Yeah,
interest.
it just seems like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, you remember how some of the buildings around the square were kind of,
Dingy?
yeah, a little bit worse for wear, they say, but even some, like, a lot more storefronts were closed up. Some of the stores down towards the Milky's, the grocery store back then. And just things are picking up. Things are, stores are being used. I mean, there's something going in over by the Associated Bank building now, isn't there? But I didn't know about it until I saw somebody in there working.
Yeah, and I think that, the Associated Bank building, that is not a facade grant, but it is, in my view, an output of the climate that you're describing, which we've had a lot of private citizens invest significant dollars into their buildings and help make the community what it is today. And what this facade grant is to try to help the rest of them continue to keep that up and just keep that momentum going forward. So as we talk about TID 5, I'm sure there'll be some beyond just facade pieces that the CDA discussed that we'll want to consider. Anything else on CDA? Okay, then I will make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right, all is in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Tammy, do you want to remind them about Nancy's?
Oh, yes.